Welcome to the Grand Shorts, a part of the Grand Podcast. The Grand. My name is Niels Totter Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grand. The Grand is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. This is the third release of episodes under my short format, The Grand Shorts. This is the first out of 2 episodes where I zoom in on my third job within this sector, Head of Funding in Offshoreenergy.dk, the official Danish energy innovation cluster, now Energy Cluster Denmark. In this episode, I elaborate on how I slowly moved into the area of preparing proposals for cluster members and the cluster itself, as well as learning how to cope with an organizational merger and also getting deeper into the Brussels bubble. Please enjoy. The Grand. Welcome to The Grand, the EU funding podcast. This is a new concept, The Grand Shorts, where I'm trying to make shorter episodes, and I'm starting with sharing insights of my career and my claim to fame, so to say, the reason why I have started this podcast in the first place, and why the insights that I have from all kinds of corners in relation to EU funding. And I do this in an overview format because not all podcast episodes should be long format. I realize that I also would like to have some shorter episodes. So I will try this. I will start with this, and then I will see how this develops. You all know, regulars, that I try different things out, and then I see which ones will float and which ones will not. We'll see. Now, to continue the story of the different places I've been working in relation to EU funding, my last episode was on the offshore energy organization I worked for. It was called the Alliance for Offshore Renewables, and that organization was an initiative funded solely by regional public money by the region of South Denmark. Now, they did not have the intention to keep running that for public money. So the idea was actually quite early in the organization's life. It started in 2010, and already in 2012, I think, they started finding out how it could continue with a local stakeholder under the wings of another organization in the region of South Denmark. And without all the middle calculations, the calculations in the middle, it ended up with being merged, the organization, with the national energy cluster in Denmark. It is now called Energy Cluster Denmark. Back then it was called Offshore Center Denmark. And this meant that I was going from being a civil servant, working for the regional government, to working for a private organization, still supporting innovation and companies and the research, the innovation and research ecosystem. But clusters are private organizations, and they live a big part of the money that they have and live for it, they apply for, in the Danish system at least, from the national funding schemes that support these kind of things. So there would be a certain amount that they would that the clusters would receive back then, at least from the public system. But the rest of it they would have to find themselves, and that would mean member fees. So it was a member-based organization, so you would have people working there much more as a private company selling a membership. So you would have people doing that in the membership department, and then you would have all kinds of activities to try to get covered the cost for what we would be doing, and that would involve being part of proposals and writing also proposals ourselves. So I came into that reality from being I was busy when I was working in the Alliance for Offshore Renewables, but I was not busy as you are busy when you're writing proposals. So that was a quite different reality that I came into when that happened. It was interesting and good to get the experience, but as most people listening to this initiative, they know that I don't like very much to write proposals. And I already back then, when I started touching it myself a little bit in this early phase, I realized it was not what I actually like to do in this world of EU R&D funding. Anyways, I would continue the work of building up the network in Europe. So I would continue the methods that I've been using when I was working for the Alliance. So that whole method around brokerage events, going to international fairs to gather contacts and so on, that I would do. I would also still go to Denmark but there I would often meet members now of the organization. But most of them would also been organizations I would have met before. So that didn't change much. So the key element of change here was that in the innovation cluster setup, I would be also looking into what kind of proposals we ourselves should step into as a partner, because we didn't do that either before in the other organizations. So we would join as partners for the communication dissemination activities in EU proposals, but also in Danish national funded projects. So that work I would do. And I would do that in close connection with some of the big stakeholders, Siemens Wind Power, for instance, Vestas, other organizations that had a huge interest in EU funding within the offshore wind sector. So that would be a core part of my work, but also developing proposals ourselves together with our members. So I sat and wrote 2 proposals for the Danish Energy Agency, I think it's called in English. They are administering a research, development and innovation funding scheme. And there I would prepare a couple of proposals through those 2 years I was working in this innovation cluster. So there I started gaining the experience of building things from scratch. Of course, there would be a concept or some specific research that Siemens wanted to go for a project with. And I would then propose a coordinator. We didn't need much partners. I think we had 3 or 4 partners in total in those proposals I was writing. But it still gave me the experience of how to do that kind of work. And anyone having written a research and innovation proposal, they will all remember when they did it, the first couple of times you did this. And I would say I'm happy that I did small ones in the beginning with not so many partners to start getting the hang of it, because it is complex. Also, even if it's for a less complex funding scheme in the Danish context. So that gave me the experience of how to receive the info from the coordinator and starting to write around it to calibrate with the template of what the funding administrators needed, talking with the funding administrators, what is exactly they need, what should we do in order to make the proposal best in relation to what they would require, then coming back and then starting to reaching out to possible partners and involving them, running a meeting, a content meeting with partners, understanding how to do these things, understanding how to mediate, understanding how to moderate these things to get the information I would need as the proposal writer, and so on and so forth. So that I learned there, or started learning it, sticking my big toe into the sea, so to say. Yeah, and besides from this, I would also spend time on putting core members and ourselves as an organization. It was very important for the organization to be part of, to get involved in EU-funded projects. So I would spend a lot of time identifying possible proposals where we could join. So I would do that, and then when I had identified things, I would prepare by directions of the coordinator. prepare the information from us, for the Form A about the organization, but of course also for the content, so the work package description input for what we would do and how we would do it. So there I was also learning the EU context. So one thing is to tell others how to do it. I had learned as an NCP how to gather information and share with other organizations how to do it. In the offshore energy organization, I would be a little bit more detailed and go into the sector, but here I would start to actually write things myself. It's so that's a big difference from telling people how to do it and then actually do it. So here I took advantage of my knowledge of that I have acquired and translated over the years. But it's still different when you do it yourself, and you lose the target sometimes when you dig your head into it. Get back to that in later episodes when I talk about being a private consultant. So there I would go to. I remember going to meetings in the UK and so on, partner meetings, in preparatory partner meetings for specific calls. We were also covering that energy cluster was also covering oil and gas, which was an interesting mix of the organization, that it was of strategic importance of the time, also for Denmark as a government, because Denmark has oil and gas. But that has been scaled down since. But back then, it was part of the focus. So yeah, that was what we were also doing. Then, I guess in this organization, I would also try for the first time how it is to be merged into something. And that is, of course, it was a challenge. And I was sad that they had to merge the organization with this. That's the truth. You have to follow suit when you are an employee, right? And people out there who have tried this would understand that if you have an organization and you like to work where you do, and then it's merged, and then things change, not everything for the best, or for what you think would be the best. So there would be a discourse and an approach that we had in the ocean energy organization, and that calibrating myself to the new reality of this innovation cluster, I didn't find myself that well. And that's the innovation clusters are innovation clusters. It's a type of organization that's the baseline conditions for them. But this is also this is the first time in my career working with EU R&D funding where I start to understand what I don't like and what I didn't like to work with, and how I didn't like, what kind of ways I didn't like to work. And that was probably one of the reasons why they had to they closed the office down in Brussels. But because what happened is that in an organization like an innovation cluster, you need to earn money. And I found it difficult to find a way in that in Brussels to start finding out how to charge that. And that's probably due to inexperience or lack of experience from a commercial point of view. I just wanted to continue working as I had done. But of course, management were having a different economic reality, and I had a very good manager. I liked him a lot, but he understood where I came from, and he understood me well. We had a very good rapport, and he was supporting me a lot because he saw the value. At the end of the day, if you can't fit into the financial reality of such an organization, then what should they do? Because it costed money, and from their point of view, it was easier to let the regional Danish representations dealing with this part of Brussels. So that was that. But before they closed it down, in the period from when I came in and that was a year and a half or something like this before they made this decision, I was making an effort for them to understand the world that I came from, and it was a weird feeling of that nobody really cared. And I remember it's probably also the first time that I was sad in a professional context, that I felt that I put so much work and energy into what I had been doing those 3 years working with this alliance. And then I came into a context where it, my colleagues, they didn't really care. That's the truth. They didn't really care. They had a reality of the cluster, and they needed to make membership events. They needed to attract members. They needed to try to find money through funding schemes and so on, to both for projects, of course, but also to fund desks. That's how it is, financial reality. But it also made me realize that that's just how working life is. Of course, that it's nothing lasts. Nothing good lasts forever, and that was just changing conditions. And if it doesn't fit with you, well, then probably it was for the better that it ended up like that. Because if I didn't like it very much, anyways, well, that's just like this. They decided to move the position back to Denmark, and of course I couldn't do that. So I of course looked for jobs in Brussels, and that will be the next episode, sharing with you what happened when I got into the private consultancy business, which is a paradox when I've just explained you that I don't, what everybody knows listening to this podcast, I don't like writing proposals. But of course, my problem was I had to find a job. I had a family. My wife was pregnant. We were getting our daughter was coming. We were living there. We were not going to Denmark. That was not going to happen. So I was desperately looking for a new job. And you don't just get it like this in Brussels when you are in a specific way. It's the security net is simply not there. So if I had been falling out, I would have had to gone to Denmark and worked, continuing looking for jobs in Brussels. So it was really a run against the clock, desperate run against the clock. Also the responsibility of a family. Most people would understand, especially people that have kids. So yes, I was looking intensively, and I ended up stomping something out of the ground myself. That's also Brussels. It's also insight into my career. I stomped it out of the ground. I looked for jobs in all corners of Brussels, but I ended up reaching out to P&O, which is the largest grants consultancy company in Europe. I wrote them to their Amsterdam office. And then they got back to me, the manager of the Brussels Schumann section. And then this is what I'm going to talk about in the next episode. But I was forgetting. This is when you do solo like this. I'm not scripted myself so much out of this. It's more out of memory that I run these small episodes here. What, of course, I need to share with you is that we managed to, in the last 2 years, a year and a half, in the organization, we moved into the big offices of Wind Energy Europe, which is now just Wind Europe. But it's a huge organization, branch organization, European industrial organization for the wind industry, industrial organization, taking care of the wind industry's interests towards the European Commission. And that was a huge insight to get into that building. So we would rent a space there. But this combined with the fact that I would have been working with the technological platform of Wind, which was run by them, this organization. So I knew them from before. But then suddenly I was also inside the organization, sitting in their offices. I didn't work for them, so I don't have that kind of insight. But I was sitting with them to start getting an idea of also insight into how does these big offices work with these industrial European umbrella organizations. How big are the organizations? How are they structured? They got a Danish director when I was there, which was a confidant of mine, and I would often, whenever he had the time, had a talk with him about things working. It was fantastic to see that and be in that, and to be privileged to get a view into how these organizations worked. And my colleague, I had a colleague, actually not just a stagiaire, so we were actually two persons sitting in Brussels, and we would be sitting there together, and she did great. She started working for them when they closed the office down. She got a job with Wind Europe and had a nice career there, and that she continued building on when she left back to Denmark. But indeed, this is also has added to what I have seen and experienced and built up of knowledge of my time in Brussels in the different corners that I've been in. So now I've shared with you how I worked as a government official, as an NCP and program committee member. Then I shared with you how I work for a sector-specific organization in a public context. And I shared with you how I worked as a part of an innovation cluster in Brussels, also seeing from inside big European umbrella industrial branch organizations. So next up, as mentioned, you will hear about what happened when I started working for a private consultancy company. Next up. Bye. That was the first out of 2 episodes on my third job within this sector. In the upcoming second episode, I zoom in on a key aspect in my work for the cluster, helping SMEs towards EU R&D funding. Stay tuned and check it out. And check out the Grant EU for more short episodes and more than 100 long format episodes about EU R&D funding. And while you're there, please do subscribe to my email list. You'll find the subscription form at the bottom of each page. And finally, connect with me on LinkedIn and follow the Grant page to get into the stream of podcast content coming out every Monday. Bye. The Grant.